Hear ye. Court of Appeals of Indiana is now in session. Please be seated. Well, good afternoon, everybody. And on behalf of the judges of the Court of Appeals of Indiana, we'd like to welcome you on this very happy occasion, a celebration of the retirement of Judge James Kirsch. I'd like to make some introductions here today, and we'll start with the judges of the Court of Appeals. And as I introduce you today, if you give a little wave or something, that way people know who we're talking about and where you're seated. But seated below me, we have Judge Edward W. Najum, Jr., Judge Terry A. Crone, Judge Rudolph R. Pyle III. They're doing good on those waves, aren't they? So, Judge Elaine B. Brown. And then with us also is Patricia A. Riley, Judge Patricia A. Riley. Judge L. Mark Bailey. Judge Melissa S. May. Judge Margaret G. Robb. Judge Nancy H. Vadic. Judge Paul D. Mathias, Judge Robert Altice, Jr., Judge Elizabeth F. Tavitas, and Judge Leanna K. Weissman. And then our tax court judge is with us, the Honorable Martha B. Wentworth, Your Honor. And then we have some senior judges with the Indiana Court of Appeals that could also be in attendance. Judge John Sharpnack, Judge Carr Darden, Judge Randall Shepard, Judge Ezra Friedlander, and Judge John Baker. And soon to become our newest judge, who will actually succeed Judge Kirsch, next Friday, is Derek Mulder. We've had some retired judges and justices with us. Before those I've already named, we have the Justices Frank Sullivan, Jr., Judge Theodore R. Bohm, Justice Myra C. Selby, Senator Aaron Freeman is with us here today, Representative Gerald Torr, former Speaker of the House, Brian Bosma, who is one of our speakers today, as I understand it. And then Representative Edward Delaney is here. Thank you for being here. We have some state trial court judges that are here. The Honorable Marla Clark from Johnson County. The Honorable Allison Frazier from Scott County. Some of our friends from the federal judiciary in the Southern District of Indiana have also joined us, including the Chief Judge, Tanya Walton Pratt, District Court Judge Jane Magnus Stenson, District Court Judge James R. Sweeney, from the United States Bankruptcy Court, the Honorable Robin L. Moberly. We only worked together for 20 years. So. Also from the U.S. Bankruptcy Court, the Honorable Andrea McCord, and Senior Judge of the United States District Court, the Honorable Sarah Evans Barker. Also with us today is Austin Parrish, the Dean of the Indiana University Maurer School of Law. Other guests include Joe Herons, who is here from the Governor's Council. He is the General Counsel to Governor Holcomb and will be representing the Governor here today. Lori Torres, the Chief Deputy Indiana Attorney General. Adrian Myring, Executive Director of the Indiana Supreme Court Disciplinary Commission. Amy Carozis, our Indiana State Public Defender. Greg Packmeyer, the Clerk of the Indiana Appellate Courts. Bradley Skolnick, Executive Director of the Indiana Office of Admission and Continuing Education. Robert Rath, Chief Innovation Officer of the Indiana Office of Judicial Administration. Holly Wojcik of the Judicial Nominating Commission. Katie Glick of the Judicial Nominating Commission. And then our very own Court Administrator of the Indiana Court of Appeals, Larry Morris. And I'd like to take this opportunity on behalf of the judges to thank Mr. Morris and his staff for the wonderful job they've done in putting this retirement ceremony here today. So I'd like to thank Chief Justice Rush and our justices of the Indiana Supreme Court for the use of their courtroom here today for this. There has not been a coup. Chief Justice Rush even was allowed me to sit in the middle today. So you can rest assured things have not changed. And with that, I'll call upon Chief Justice Rush to please introduce the members of her court and make any remarks she would like.
Thank you, Chief Judge Bradford, and welcome to the Indiana Supreme Court. On behalf of my court, we are thrilled to be here celebrating the career of, I like to call him Gentleman Jim Kirsch. Judge, you've had an unbelievable career. You have your kindness, your cooperation, your collaboration with my court. We started something shortly after I joined the court called the Committee of Mutual Concerns, where we met with the Court of Appeals, and Jim was one of the inaugural members of the Committee of Mutual Concerns. So if your court reporters are upset because their records have to be done in 45 days instead of 90, Gentleman Jim is the one that they can call. So Jim, we wish you well. I was very happy to sign the order for you to be senior judge. I have depended on Jim for just, personal questions, professional questions, and one of my first visits when I became a justice was going up to his office, and it's been a wonderful friendship since then, so thank you. So my colleagues are here. They joined in this celebration today. Justice David could not be here, but he sends his best, and he reached out to you beforehand. We have Justice Mark Massa, Justice Jeffrey Slaughter, my colleague, Justice Christopher Goff. Thank you.
Now we have some speakers to speak about Judge Kirsch here today, and we're delighted to have them. And the first of them is Mr. Joseph Harams, General Counsel to the Governor, Eric Holcomb of the state of Indiana. Mr. Harams.
Thank you, Chief Judge Bradford, Judge Kirsch, Chief Justice Rush, members of the Indiana Supreme Court and Court of Appeals, and honorable guests, good afternoon. Governor Holcomb wishes he could be here today to present this award himself, but unfortunately that wasn't possible. So it's my privilege and honor to present it on his behalf. The Sagamore Award, created by former Indiana Governor Ralph Gates in the 1940s, is the state's highest honor, coveted by many, received by few. It is given by Indiana governors to honor those few, indeed rare individuals who have made an extraordinary contribution, had a remarkable impact in some way on their community or to the state of Indiana. And this award serves a vital purpose in our society. In fact, like many leaders, Governor Holcomb wholeheartedly believes in the purpose and importance of giving awards. They're not just to rightfully recognize someone for what they have done, they're also given to encourage and inspire others to go out and make a difference too. Awards are a way to show others what a single person can achieve and the impact they can make. Governor Holcomb's process for approval for this award, as you would expect, is rigorous, and the bar for the award is high. Many are turned down. For others, it's a close call, but Judge Kirsch clears that bar by a mile. Governor Holcomb approved this award for him without any hesitation whatsoever. When we talked about Judge Kirsch in our office and what I might say today, several things were quite obvious. First, Judge Kirsch has never, even before he was appointed to the Court of Appeals by Governor Bayh in 1994, been content to simply go to work, do his job, and go home at night. He does so much more. Something I've learned over my years is that society depends upon, in fact thirsts for, those rare individuals who make a genuine and meaningful impact in some way because they help make it all better. Judge Kirsch is one of those rare individuals. Many of you know him well and all that he's done, and other speakers today will undoubtedly talk about his many contributions over the decades. But I wanted to mention a few. President of the Indianapolis Bar Association and Indiana Bar Foundation, distinguished fellow, chair of the bar's appellate practice section, served on numerous boards including Goodwill Industries, the Urban League, the Benjamin Harrison Presidential Site, the Legal Aid Society, the United Way. Frequent speaker and lecturer, including presentations at more than 300 continuing legal education programs. That's remarkable. Presiding judge of our state's largest local judicial system here in Marion County at a young age, and of course nearly 3 decades serving on this court. Judge Kirsch is also the recipient of many awards. In fact, he has received this very award, the Sagamore, from 4 different governors already, both Republican and Democrat. It's rare for anyone to receive a Sagamore, but it is extraordinarily rare to receive it from now 5 different governors. But all of these governors recognize the obvious. Judge Kirsch has made incredible contributions, and he has given of himself unfailingly in service to others and to our state. Besides the judiciary, Judge Kirsch has been a fixture in the world of academia since 1990, teaching a global MBA program, and he holds faculty appointments in several other countries. Something Governor Holcomb looks for when it comes to public servants are what he calls the 3 H's. Is a person honest, humble, and hungry? He talks about it all the time. Many people have the first 2. They're honest and humble, and that's certainly good. But not everyone is hungry. Hungry in the sense of being driven to do more than just what's expected of them, being driven to make a real difference in some meaningful and remarkable way. Judge Kirsch, as his actions have demonstrated over many decades, whether in the legal profession, the judiciary, academia, or elsewhere, has indeed been hungry, and our state is better because of it. I can also tell you that the governor, and by extension my legal team and I, look for that hunger in the candidates being considered for judicial appointment in our state at both the local and appellate levels. We probe in every interview on this very point on whether the applicant is truly hungry. We ask how they would describe the ideal judge and what that judge would do. We ask what ideas they have for possible innovations or improvements that could help make the judiciary better. We ask for them to share their thoughts about serving not only in the courthouse, but outside of it as well. Those who light up at those questions impress. Governor Holcomb wants his appointees to have an insatiable hunger, and Judge Kirsch is certainly a role model for that. In talking about Judge Kirsch and how he has impacted our state and beyond over many decades, the governor, who has a talent for accurately and succinctly summing up a matter without using a lot of words like lawyers sometimes do, simply said, wow. That wow is the reason this award is being given today. Judge Kirsch, as you prepare to retire from the court, Governor Holcomb conveys his deep appreciation and the appreciation of our state for all that you have done during your long and very distinguished career that has made our state a better place. Congratulations, and it's an honor to provide you with this award today. Thank you.
Thank you very, very much, Mr. Herons, and Judge Kirsch, congratulations to you. You're going to get a lot of those today. Our next speaker I know is no stranger to any of you. He's the former Speaker of the Indiana House of Representatives, Brian Bosma.
Thank you. Chief Justice Rush, Chief Judge Bradford, Judge Kirsch, and I'm only going to mention one other, Judge Vedic. That's because that's one of the few times I've pronounced Nancy's name correctly. Having introduced the entire judiciary from the speaker's rostrum more than 12 times, it was only in the 11th and 12th occasion when I believe I didn't call Judge Vedic Judge Vidic. So Nancy, my final apologies for 10 years of mispronouncing your name. And I suppose since court is in session, I must say, may it please the court, it is a pleasure to be here to talk a little bit about Jim Kirsch. Jim Knauer's coming up too. Jim Kirsch, and I'm going to talk about Jim's investments. When people retire, they have to review their investments, be sure they're prepared for it. And I'm not, however, going to talk about Jim's IRA or whether he buys gold or not. I'm going to talk about his investment in young lawyers because I was the beneficiary of that investment. This is the first time I've set foot in the building since my retirement, August 1. Had no occasion to do so, although I did tune in today to hear some of my friends and colleagues debate something I do not miss at all, and that is the redistricting process. I met Jim at a Indianapolis Bar Association luncheon when he was the president of the Bar Association, and I was a third-year law student that was receiving a service award. Like Jim, I'm a joiner. I can't stop participating in things. And we sat next to each other and had lunch, I think, at the Columbia Club on a dais, and Jim asked me, where are you going to work? I said, well, I've received a job offer from Bingham, Summers, Walsh, and Spillman, and I've accepted it, and I'm going to work there. And he says, if your plans ever change, call me. So in January of 1986, it was apparent that I was going to have an opportunity to run for the House, and Jerry Moss, my managing partner there, said, we'd love for you to stay, we want you to stay, we don't think we can handle having an associate that also serves in the General Assembly. We just can't make it work. So my next call was to Jim Kirsch. And I said, Mr. Kirsch, you indicated that if I ever had a change in plans to come talk to you, and I've got a change in plans, and I'm not sure it's going to fit with what you might have in mind, but I'd like to come talk to you about it. And then shortly thereafter, after I was interviewed by Jim Knauer and John Petter and Jim Lauk and other partners at KGR, May 10th, 1986, I started there. That was the same day I was sworn in here in the Ways and Means committee room by one of Speaker Bob Daley's last acts. In fact, we call him reaching over to kiss my wife the picture of that kiss of death because he was defeated shortly after that. But Jim, I've just been thinking about that day and seeing my partners now sitting here and our office manager, and I think all of KGR, led by you, marched right over here to support your young associate that was going to be working with you and also would be serving in the General Assembly. So Jim was willing to make an investment. He was willing to make an investment in someone who wanted to both practice law as a young professional and serve their community through public service here in the General Assembly. So, Jim, I've been offered a lot of suggestions. Mr. Knauer last night offered some thoughts about the cozy. I won't go into that. And if you don't know what the cozy is and you're under 50, you turn to a neighbor and ask. Representative Torr wanted me to talk about the footnotes that you put in an opinion that was a string of 60s rock and roll songs, apparently. But I'm going to leave all those aside. I am going to thank you for the investment that you made, not just in me, but in so many other professionals, because I've heard so many say it. Jim, thank you, congratulations, and I'm very pleased, along with your former partners, to be here to honor you today.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Our next speaker is the Honorable Marla Clark, Judge of the Johnston Superior Court, room number 4. Welcome, Your Honor.
Good afternoon. It's my sincere pleasure to be able to share the podium with all the distinguished speakers who have gathered here today to honor Judge Kirsch. I'm humbled to have the opportunity to address you all on the occasion of the celebration of the career transition of one of my favorite human beings. Let me give you all some context about the special relationship that we've shared for the last almost 25 years. My first job after law school was for a national law firm that was out of state. And it was going well, but because I have deep Hoosier roots, when I started my family, I wanted to move back home. So I started looking for job opportunities that would allow me to do that. So in the spring of 1996, I had a single disastrous interview. Remember, this was a different time, but I was interviewing, and the interviewer, I was a visibly pregnant young woman. And the interviewer asked me how I thought I was going to manage a new family and a career at the same time. And I didn't have a good answer for that. So I went home. So about a year later, my good friend from law school was clerking for the wonderful Judge Najum at the time. And she called me and she said the Honorable James S. Kirsch of the Indiana Court of Appeals was looking for a temporary law clerk just from the spring to August when his permanent law clerk would arrive. And I said, I don't think so. I'm still stung from the previous experience. And she said, he is so warm, he's so inviting, he's so generous, he's so relatable, you will not have that experience with him. So again, though, visibly pregnant again, for the second time, I waddled into this building right here for a second job interview, and it didn't go the way the first one went. So I have 3 distinct memories of that day, 25 years ago. One is this judge of the Indiana Court of Appeals, only the second judge I've ever met in my life. He met me at the door when I had my interview, and instead of sitting behind his desk, his big imposing desk, he ushered me to a seat on the sofa in his office. And then he sat in the armchair. And it was more like a conversation between friends than it was a job interview. And it was a wonderful experience. The second thing I remember is hearing his infectious laugh for the first time. And you all know what I'm talking about, right? So I was immediately at ease, and we laughed a lot during that interview. And the third thing I remember is he was completely supportive of me and my situation and my hopes and my dreams, and I walked out of that room with a job. So that temporary job lasted 8 years. He took a chance on me when other people wouldn't have. And within days, I realized that I had found the perfect position for me where I could hone my legal skills. And I'd also found an impeccable role model that would teach me to be the best lawyer and person that I could be. So during my time clerking with Judge Kirsch, and ever since, he's mentored me both professionally and personally. He's been generous with his time and his experience, and he's supported me through personal triumphs and challenges, and professional successes and some setbacks. My development as a lawyer has benefited from years of lively legal debate with him, and my growth as a person has benefited from years of advice and his nuggets of wisdom. He has shared advice on a myriad of topics over the last 25 years, and I'm going to share some of those with you. Family always comes first. If you can't explain your legal reasoning in writing, you're probably on the wrong track. If you want your kids to talk to you about something, take them for a ride in the car. Sorry, I'm getting choked up. We are not defined by our mistakes. Spend exactly as much time on a case as the case requires, no more and no less. The skills required to make the team and the skills required to play the game are not the same. Have a plan when you go to a cocktail party. To run a successful campaign, it helps to have a good hook. And always be loyal, respectful, and gracious to everyone, no matter what. Judge has always given me sincere advice, even when it wasn't what I wanted to hear. And Judge, it is 100% my fault, it's on me, that after years of steadfast tutelage, I still can't apply or even explain the Brothers Rule. It's something about a comma, I think. Yeah. Let's call it my very organic sense of grammar was really benefited from my fellow law clerk's review of all my drafts, Judge's edits, and Judge Najam's ruler and precise pen. I know all of my fellow alumni of Judge Kirsch's chambers. That's Nick, Susan, Sherry, Angela, Kent, Melissa, Allison, Catherine, Jeff, Pete, Beth, Dennis, John, Heather, and Ann would all agree with me. The judge's guidance has changed our lives for the better. The sharpness of his legal intellect, his engaging style, and his generosity of spirit assisted us in becoming fierce advocates for justice, as well as dedicated public servants, partners, public defenders, general counsels, humanitarians, philanthropists, and judicial officers. And this is all in addition to the lives he touched with his teaching. He has molded a generation of leaders. Because of the open and egalitarian tone that Judge set in his chambers, we were encouraged to challenge each other and him, which caused us to focus and improve our legal analysis. We made meaningful relationships with one another. I also interacted with and learned from other judges on the Court of Appeals, Judges Najam and Baker, Bailey and Sullivan, Judges Riley, Vedic, and Robb. I learned from all of you, among others. And I even had the opportunity to meet and get to know Judge Larry McKinney simply because Judge Kirsch asked him to speak with me. I left Judge Kirsch's chambers to become a magistrate and eventually a Superior Court judge. On my last day, I left a bottle of wine in his chair with a note that said to save it and we would share it sometime. I think it's time. Judge, I'm so happy that you're finally going to have the chance to enjoy your well-earned retirement. I know you're going to enjoy your service as a senior judge and revel in your time in Indianapolis and Hilton Head with your family and your friends. And you can even work a Sunday crossword puzzle every day if you want. You've made dozens of greater contributions to Indiana jurisprudence than molding this lawyer and judge. But please always remember how grateful I am for the time and the care you've invested in me to make me the best version of myself I can be. We former clerks are all very grateful to you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Judge Clark. Our next speaker is a judge of the Court of Appeals of Indiana, the Honorable Edward Najam, Jr.
Judge Kirsch, Chief Justice Rush, Chief Judge Bradford, Mr. Herons, Justices of the Indiana Supreme Court, Judges of the Court of Appeals, trial judges, attorneys, and the many other friends and family of Judge Kirsch. It is my privilege today to say a few words about my friend and colleague, James S. Kirsch, upon his retirement from the Court of Appeals. It's also my privilege to share the podium with Mr. Herons and with former Speaker of the House, Brian Bosma, and Johnson Superior Court Judge Marla Clark. As you have heard, Jim Kirsch mentored Brian and Marla, and they have both excelled. The mentoring of younger lawyers is a valuable tradition in the legal profession. Jim and I have been judicial colleagues now for 27 and a half years. Judge Patricia Riley has been our third colleague during that entire time. Thus, under Trial Rule 11 and Evidence Rule 702, I am a witness, qualified by my own knowledge and experience, to testify in the form of an opinion about Judge Kirsch. However, I will stipulate that some of my remarks today constitute impermissible vouching testimony. Jim Kirsch graduated with honors from Cathedral High School. He graduated with honors from Butler University. He graduated with honors from the McKinney School of Law. And today, Jim Kirsch graduates with honors from the Court of Appeals. Jim was the managing partner of his law firm, presiding judge of the Marion Superior Court, and chief judge of our court. He has always been a leader, and leadership has come to him naturally. Jim has been a leader, and not because he's been driven by personal ambition, but because his peers at every level have entrusted him with leadership. In April, when the Indiana House and Senate honored Jim with a concurrent resolution, every lawyer in the House and Senate joined in sponsoring the resolution. The resolution recognized in part Jim's prodigious contribution to Indiana law by authoring decisions that are admired for their sound logic, clear reasoning, and practical results. There was an immediate flurry of emails from the other judges on our court congratulating Jim for this recognition. Judge Nancy Vedic simply wrote, "Jim Kirsch rocks." I wrote Jim that I have this resolution marked as Exhibit A and will offer the same in evidence at your retirement ceremony and then rest my case. It was serendipitous. Well, before I joined the court, I had tried cases before Judge Baker, Judge Bartow, Judge Cheatham, and Judge Kirsch. And it was serendipitous when in 1990, I first encountered Judge Kirsch in Marion Superior Court 5. My client had sued a former employee for breach of a covenant not to compete. In private practice, Jim had specialized in business and commercial law, so my case landed right in his wheelhouse. Jim's brilliance became readily apparent to me when he entered a preliminary injunction for my client. Of course, at that time, neither Jim nor I could have foreseen that within 4 short years we would be colleagues on the Court of Appeals. Now, it was only later that I learned that Jim's closest mentor and partner at Kroger, Gardis, and Regas was James A. Knauer, who's seated in the row in front of me just a few feet ahead. Jim Knauer is a distinguished business and commercial law litigator. And before that, he was my Indiana University fraternity brother. And I like to add that Mr. Knauer was very hard on me when I was a pledge. And I'm just now getting over it. Jim Knauer became the human link who proved that even before Jim Kirsch and I knew each other and became judicial colleagues, there was only a few degrees of separation between us. After I had appeared in Jim Kirsch's court, I only knew of him by his excellent reputation as a trial judge. When Sue Shields announced that she was leaving the court to become a United States magistrate, I called Jim and suggested that we have lunch. Along with many others, I encouraged Jim to apply for the Sue Shields vacancy. I had no personal or professional relationship with Jim, but I just knew that Jim Kirsch belonged on the Court of Appeals. Jim was nominated, appointed, and joined the court in March of 1994. I highly recommend that everyone read Jim's biographical sketch that will appear soon in early next year in the book entitled Judges of the Court of Appeals of Indiana. In that sketch, the authors, John and Jan Vargo, describe Jim as one of those rare judges who possesses both head and heart. This occasion requires that we place Jim's selection as a Court of Appeals judge and his tenure on the court in its historical perspective. Next year, we will observe the 50th anniversary of Article 7 of the Indiana Constitution, which established the merit selection of Indiana's appellate judges. Jim Kirsch is exactly the judge the Judicial Study Commission and the General Assembly had in mind when the constitutional amendment that became Article 7, the new judicial article, was proposed and enacted. When Randall T. Shepard was sworn in as Chief Justice in March of 1987 in the old Vanderburgh County Courthouse, Justice Shepard described his aspirations for the Indiana Supreme Court, in part when he stated that, "We want to be a court known widely for the clarity of its thinking, the common sense and humanity of its decisions, and the excellence of its writing." The new Chief Justice was speaking about the Supreme Court on that day but his aspirations were for the entire Indiana judiciary. And as Chief Justice Shepard worked to implement his vision, he encountered James S. Kirsch. First, the Supreme Court appointed Jim to serve as a judge pro tempore to fill a temporary vacancy on the Marion Superior Court. Then Governor Bayh appointed Jim to fill the permanent vacancy on that court. And in 1990, Jim was elected to the seat. And only 2 years later, he became the presiding judge of that court. Then, within the short span of only 2 more years, the Judicial Nominating Commission nominated Jim 3 times, once for the Supreme Court and twice for our court. The evidence shows beyond a reasonable doubt that Jim Kirsch fit the vision which Chief Justice Shepard and the commission had for an appellate judge. Several years ago, Chief Judge John Sharpnack reminded our court of the difference between congeniality and collegiality. Judge Sharpnack noted that while congeniality refers to pleasant and agreeable relationships, collegiality refers to the exercise of shared authority. Appellate judges who serve on the same court are colleagues and partners. We are engaged in a common enterprise. At its best, appellate judging is a collaboration in which more than one mind is brought to bear on the task. Jim Kirsch has been both congenial and collegial, a steady, reliable, and worthy judicial partner. Now, most of you probably don't know that the IU School of Medicine Department of Medical and Molecular Genetics has mapped Jim's genetic profile and found that Jim has a judge's gene. Jim has the genetic markers for sound judgment, including knowledge, experience, curiosity, discernment, courage, and humanity. Those who know Jim know of his humanity, that he cares, and that is what John and Jan Vargo meant when they wrote that Jim has the heart of a judge. Jim is never jaded. He cares about every case. He is also always thoughtful, and it's apparent when he speaks about something that he has, in fact, thought about it. Now, Jim and I have spent many hours together over the years, and I want to share with you just a couple occasions we spent together. With Judge John Baker, Jim joined us on a road trip deep to the Hoosier uplands of southern Indiana for an oral argument in Paoli. I remember that the 3 of us climbed the stairs to the 3rd floor courtroom and squeezed onto the bench of Orange Circuit Court Judge Larry Blanton to hear an appeal in a land sale dispute before school children from Paoli, Orleans, and French Lick. I remember when Judge Paul Mathias and I joined Jim at Cathedral High School to hear a criminal case at Jim's alma mater. This was a homecoming for Jim, a favorite son of Cathedral. Jim's father had attended Cathedral. Jim was known and respected not for his exploits on the football field, but for his intellectual prowess and his distinguished public service. During our visit, one could sense his pride and personal connection with Cathedral, and the feeling was mutual. Now, I regret to inform my colleagues, Judge Terry Crone and Elizabeth Tavitas, that when Jim refers to the Irish, he's referring to Cathedral and not to Notre Dame. And of course, like many of my colleagues, I remember having visited West Lafayette to hear more than one oral argument in Jim's classroom courtroom at the Krannert Graduate School of Management at Purdue, where Jim taught courses for 31 years in the Executive MBA program. Jim's courses were entitled The Legal Environment of Business and Transnational Business Law, courses which he also taught around the world in 33 countries on 5 continents. I also remember a panel conference with Jim and Judge Elaine Brown in Jim's chambers. We spent an hour unpacking the case. We examined the case from every angle. There was a respectful give and take among us as we discussed how the case should be decided and how we should explain our decision. In that brief moment, you could feel Jim's enthusiasm, see the gears turning in his head, witness his seriousness of purpose, his knowledge of the record, his respect for the opinion of others, and his commitment to get it right. Finally, I shall miss our visits in the atrium, adjacent to our courtroom and our offices. From time to time, Jim and I have left our offices for a sidebar in the atrium to discuss judicial business and often to report to each other on our families. In those moments, the deliberate Judge Kirsch evaporates with pride and a big smile for his wife, Jan, and his children, Adam and Alexandra, and for his recently acquired new granddaughter, Seton. And the twinkle in Jim's eye when he mentions his family is a sight to behold. Now, the court is delighted with Governor Holcomb's appointment of Derek Mulder, and we thank Derek for being here today as Jim's successor. But we've been saddened by Jim's retirement, so Jim's 14 colleagues pondered what we could give Jim to brighten his departure. We decided to issue a certificate good for one denial of transfer. Signed by all of us and embossed with the seal of the court. Of course, this certificate was a worthless document, but always the gentleman, Jim's response was, "It's the thought that counts." But then, our Supreme Court saved the day when unwittingly the court denied transfer in one of Jim's cases and thus appeared to ratify our bogus certificate and made us all feel good. In the Republic, Plato defines justice as the highest good. Plato says that a just man is a man in just the right place, doing his best. In other words, justice in an individual consists of realizing one's potential in the role for which he is best suited. By Plato's definition, Jim Kirsch has been a just man who has been in exactly the right place as a judge, and in his judicial role has realized his potential, and in so doing has led a consequential life of service to the people of Indiana. Jim once told a biographer, "I love private practice. I love the Superior Court bench. I love the Court of Appeals. I feel blessed to have gotten each of those three jobs." In 1999, Judge Robert D. Rucker, Jr. retired from our court and joined the Supreme Court in a ceremony which took place in this courtroom. In his remarks on that occasion, Bob Rucker recited a Chinese proverb which states that if you love your work, you'll never work a day in your life. Our colleague James S. Kirsch, a son of Indianapolis and a son of Indiana, has loved his work in the legal vineyard as a practicing lawyer, trial judge, and appellate judge. And for that reason, he has never worked a day in his life. Thank you.
Thank you, Judge Kirsch, and all our speakers for your so eloquent remarks about Judge Kirsch here today. Would like to inform you, Judge Kirsch, and others that the judges of the Court of Appeals did pool their resources together, and on the honor of the occasion of your retirement, we've made a donation to the Benjamin Harrison Presidential Site. So, well, as you all know, Jim has been a teacher most of his life. He started as a Catholic middle school teacher here in Indianapolis, and as Judge Najam just stated, taught all over the globe, over 30 countries, several continents. And he's taught probably a lot of people in this room, and me too. When I applied for the open seat on the Court of Appeals that I now hold, like a good little candidate, I went over and visited with Judge Kirsch. And he recommended that he graciously agreed with me, and we spoke about what would make a good appellate judge. And he recommended I read a magazine article entitled Judging. Well, I went over to the McKinney School of Law Library, and I found it in a periodical there, and I copied it, and I've had it for 15 years. All right, here it is, Jim. It's been sitting in a folder. And I recently reread this article as I thought about Jim and what I might say to you today and to Jim today. And the author discussed the kind of an appellate judge that Jim Kirsch has proven to be. And I'm going to briefly go over these qualities. And I thought, well, let's each of us think of Judge Kirsch, Jim, and how he epitomizes and exemplifies each of these qualities. Impartiality. Impartiality is the perfect judge's most important quality. Fair treatment for all and due consideration for the interests of all. Integrity. The perfect judge is a person of great integrity. Integrity requires utter sincerity, honesty, and candor. And this one, you really excel at this one, Judge Kirsch, and plus it's my favorite. Compassion and kindness. The perfect judge is gentle, kind, and courteous to both his staff and litigants. In short, the perfect judge is a good, decent human being. Respect for colleagues. The perfect appellate judge respects the views of his colleagues, but is free to question, criticize, and dissent when he thinks it's necessary. And yes, he is compassionate and kind, but he will fire off a dissent now and then. Always respectfully worded. Good judgment and common sense. The perfect appellate judge bridges the gap between the academic and business worlds. He uses life's experiences and has a sound grasp of what is practical and reasonable. The author summed up the perfect trial judge in saying, the perfect appellate judge is both a conservative and a progressive. He conserves what should be preserved and proceeds with those principles that will help society progress. He possesses the enthusiasm of youth and the wisdom of age. He looks backward for guidance and forward with vision. He is balanced. Well, Jim, our friend, you are all these things and so much, much more. For over 27 years, you've been a balanced pillar of this court, serving with distinction and exemplifying wisdom, integrity, kindness, and humility. We are grateful for your outstanding service to this court and look forward with excitement as you continue your service as a senior judge of the Court of Appeals of Indiana. In closing my remarks, I'd like to share with you a statement that Judge Kirsch recently made in an article of the Indiana Lawyer, which was about his retirement, and in summing up and referring to his legal career and his life, he said that he'd been blessed. Well, Jim, I think it's true. I think you have been blessed, but what's so very important is that you've taken this blessing and you've blessed all of us and so many more outside this room, around this state, and around our world. Congratulations from all your colleagues and friends at the Court of Appeals of Indiana. And Judge Kirsch, the courtroom is now yours, sir.
Thank you all. Counsel Herons, Chief Justice Rush, and Justices of the Supreme Court, Chief Justice Bradford, my colleagues on the Court of Appeals, family and friends. I begin this afternoon with an admission which I know will not make me the most popular person in the room. That admission is that I'm a lifelong baseball fan of the New York Yankees. I grew up idolizing Mickey Mantle, who was my hero, along with Roger Maris, Whitey Ford, Yogi Berra, and a host of others. This afternoon, however, what I want to reference are not the stars of my youth in the 1950s and 60s. I want to go back even further and recall for you the retirement of Lou Gehrig, which was later memorialized on film with Gary Cooper playing the role of Gehrig. The date was July 4th, 1939, 82 years ago. Gehrig's body was ravaged by the disease which would later bear his name and take his life. Notwithstanding these challenges, Gehrig stood at home plate at Yankee Stadium in the Bronx and addressed the sold-out crowd, saying in a very broken voice, "Today, I consider myself the luckiest man on the face of the earth." As I sit here before you, today, I consider myself the luckiest man on the face of the earth. Of all the emotions that are flowing through me as I sit before you, the feeling that overrides all the others is gratitude. A gratitude that extends to everyone in this room, a gratitude that I have carried with me for 49 years, a gratitude I will carry with me for as long as I live. The best advice I ever heard is to find what you love to do, and you will never have to work a day in your life. For the entirety of my career, I have gotten to do what I love to do, and has rarely seemed like work. From the beginning, I was blessed by incredible mentors and colleagues, men and women who worked very hard and who produced outstanding results and were wonderful role models to me. My parents, Paul and Jane Kirsch, instilled in my brother Bob and me the values that were instilled in them by their parents, and the values that I hope my wife and Jan have instilled in our children. My aunts and uncles reinforced those values. For 16 years, beginning in 1972, I practiced law with Kroger, Gardis, and Regas. The firm still bears the names of its founders, Don Kroger, John Gardis, and Bill Regas. All three are now deceased. They were three of the finest lawyers and three of the finest men I've ever known. I practiced next to Jim Knauer, who succeeded to that legacy that the founding partners left and who built the firm into what it is today. You heard from Brian Bosma, whom I had the pleasure to hire as an associate at KGR. Brian's been a longtime partner in the firm while also serving for a number of years in the State House of Representatives, including 10 years as Speaker of the House. Nearly 49 years ago, in December of 1972, I was working as a law clerk at KGR. I was halfway through law school. The job description was 25 hours a week. I worked 50, but it wasn't work. I learned. John Gardis, Don Kroger, Bill Regas, and Jim Knauer were very different, but collectively they were a powerhouse that taught and trained me. During my 16 years with the firm, I had the honor of serving as a law clerk, associate, partner, and managing partner. In 1988, I was appointed Judge Pro Tem of Superior Court 5, and I was later elected judge of that court. I loved my 6 years on that court, and I learned something new every day. In 1990, in addition to my judicial duties, I was appointed as visiting professor of law at Purdue University's Cranner School of Management. And I had the honor to serve in that role for 31 years, teaching the legal environment of business and transnational business law. In the last 20 of those years, most of my teaching was international, and I've now taught law in 33 countries on 5 continents. On March 21st, 1994, 27 and 1/2 years ago, I was standing at the podium where the speakers stood today. Some of you who are here today were with me on the day I was appointed judge of the Court of Appeals of Indiana. And I have had the tremendous honor of serving for the last 27 years, 6 months, and 2 days. One of the best pieces of career advice that I've ever heard is to find what you love to do in life, and you will never work a day. For 27 years, I have done what I love to do. And I have to confess that very few of those days in the 27 years seemed like work. Appellate courts are very different from trial courts, and I'm very glad to have both experiences. The trial judge is with people for most of every day, but when it comes time to make a decision, the judge is all alone. An appellate judge spends most of his or her time in their office, but when it comes to decision time, the decision is made by the panel, not by an individual judge. From time to time, we may be surprised by the reasoning of a colleague, but different people have different life experiences and often reach decisions in different ways. There is a collective wisdom to the process. Several years ago, I read an article in Litigation Magazine entitled Ideal Appellate Judges. The author, Robert Seligson, a lawyer who practices in San Francisco, wrote that the perfect appellate judge requires only impartiality, integrity, humaneness, independence, collegiality, indefatigability, obedience, humility, scholarship, and courage, as well as the ability to write scintillating prose, a sense of tradition, a view to the future, and a concern for the administration of justice. Well, when Mr. Seligson set out a number of important qualities for a judge, I think he omitted what I believe are the two most important attributes: a passionate love of the law and an equally passionate love of people. For 33 years, I've had the honor of being a judge. I have relished every one of those years. Every day, I am reminded of how special the job is, how meaningful, how varied. Being an appellate judge is wonderful, stimulating, and fascinating. The work is varied and mind-expanding. We work with our colleagues and our law clerks to answer questions, make law, and solve real-life problems. Every day, judges make decisions that affect people's lives. And not only those people, but the lives of their families, their friends, their businesses, their neighborhoods, their cities, their states, their countries, and their world. As I look back on my 33 years that I've been a judge, my feelings and thoughts reflect my gratitude, my pride, and my nostalgia. I hope that in the 4,000 plus cases in which I participated, I made a contribution to the preservation of justice that reflects the honor and confidence that you entrusted in me many years ago. Consider for a moment what may appear to be a routine criminal appeal. The surface issue is whether a criminal conviction should be affirmed or reversed. In making that determination, we will look at whether the defendant's constitutional rights were violated in the search or arrest, whether procedural rules were followed, whether the evidence is sufficient on each element of the charge, whether the evidence was properly admitted, whether the jury was correctly instructed, and whether a sentence is in accordance with law. We will concern whether error has been committed, whether it has been properly preserved, and whether it is prejudicial or harmless. We will determine our standard of review. If the matter lies within the discretion of the trial court, we will determine whether the trial court abused that discretion. These are the legal issues. At the same time, we consider the non-legal issues. Will the defendant stay in jail or be set free? What is the effect on his life or family? What is our confidence level that the right result has been reached, the just result? Will a rape or a child molestation victim have to again relive the horror of the crimes perpetrated upon them by testifying at retrial? Will our opinion make the papers as the latest aberrant example of what's wrong with the legal system? Is there anything we can do about it? Will my colleagues on the panel agree with what I have written? Will I agree with what my colleagues have written? What compromises will we have to consider in order to get a full concurrence? These are the non-legal issues. Lon Fuller was a professor of law at Harvard University. Many years ago, he wrote that the common law works itself pure. Purity, however, is hard to define, and we have yet to reach that goal. During my 27-year tenure on the Court of Appeals, our court has undergone a number of major changes. When I was first appointed, I was one of 9 judges. Today, we have 15 judges and 5 senior judges. which will soon become 6 as I move across the street, and join several of my former colleagues, as a senior judge. I could not be prouder of our court and its members. We are one of a dwindling number of intermediate appellate courts in this country who decide all of their cases by full written opinions. Many appellate courts today issue primarily per curiam decisions which inform the parties to proceeding as to who won and who lost, but fail to set out the legal and logical bases for their ruling. In addition to deciding cases by full written opinions, we are an exceptionally timely court. Each of the 15 judges on our court serves on one of 5 three-judge panels for 4 months, and we complete the work of these panels during those 4-month periods. In the course of 2.5 years, we serve with every judge on our court. In 1982, Judge Ruggero Alderset of the United States Court of Appeals for the 3rd District wrote that the qualities of an ideal appellate judge include the quality of being fair, just, and impartial, the twin qualities of devotion and decisiveness, the quality of clarity of thought and expression, the quality of being professionally literate, the quality of institutional fidelity, the quality of political responsibility. And if you look at our court, you will see in my colleagues all these qualities. I have had many blessings in my life. These blessings begin with my wife, Jan, Dr. Jan Kirsch. Jan is not only my wife, she's my best friend and my partner in the enterprise of life. She was the head of medical nursing at Indiana University Hospital for a number of years. She then served as professor at Ball State University and then became a consultant working with hospitals and healthcare systems throughout the Midwest. They continue with our children. Our son Adam was an honors graduate with distinction at Wabash College. Adam worked for various political organizations before starting a political consulting firm working with candidates across the country. Adam's wife, Karen, our daughter-in-law, is a graduate of Indiana University and the University of Oklahoma. She is now the director of championships for Division II at the NCAA, having previously held the position of Associate Director of Academic and Membership Affairs. Our daughter, Alexandra, was a Phi Beta Kappa graduate at Kenyon College, got her PhD at Loyola University, and her postdoctorate at Mayo Clinic, and now works as a neuropsychologist in Chicago. Her husband, our son-in-law, Kyle Oberfell, is a principal with Boston Consulting Group. He received his undergraduate degree at the University of California and his doctorate in molecular science at Northwestern University. And last, but certainly not least, is Alexander and Kyle's daughter and our first grandchild, Seton James Kirsch, who was born on July 11th of this year. Many years ago, Mark Twain said, "Find a job you enjoy doing, and you will never work a day in your life." For 48 years, I've had jobs that I've loved doing. In each of these jobs, I've worked with incredibly bright and talented men and women, many of whom are here today. I will always be grateful for the opportunities, the support, and the guidance they have given me. With us today are a number of my present and former law clerks, whom I want to acknowledge and thank. For 27 years, they worked very hard and made me look better than I really am. They were devoted, sincere, and hardworking, and I will always be grateful to them. Would my present and former law clerks who are here please stand? Thank you. Thank all of you. I thank you for being here today and for all you did during the time we worked together. It was wonderful to see you. I also want to acknowledge my successor, Derek Mulder. Derek is soon to be Judge Derek Mulder. Derek, would you please stand? Derek, I join with my colleagues in commending you for the outstanding work that you've done in practice, in congratulating you on your appointment, and in welcoming you to our court. There's one final person I want to specifically acknowledge and thank. Supernet has been my administrative assistant for 33 years. In addition to being my assistant, she's been much, much more. My counsel, critic, supporter, and most of all, my friend. During these 33 years, Sue has made me a better job, and I cannot overstate all she has done during these years. Sue, would you please stand? I want to conclude with a quotation from Daniel Webster. The quotation was in the form of a toast. It goes, "To the law, it has honored us. Now may we honor it." The law has honored me throughout my career. Each of you honors me by your presence today. Let us honor it as we move forward on this great venture. I thank all of you for being here today and for all that you do and all that you have done. Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Judge Kirsch. And Judge Kirsch and we, the judges of the Court of Appeals, would like you to join us in continuing to toast Judge Kirsch on the occasion of his retirement at this splendid reception that's been prepared for us out in the hallway. And Sheriff Dowdle, court is adjourned at this time.